Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Hill. Welcome to Charting Change in Legal. I'm here with Ari Kaplan. Hi Ari.
Hi, how are you? As everybody knows, I'm an analyst that covers legal, and I'm so excited to be here with you.
I stole your introduction. You
You
normally do
did.
that.
You
Hi,
did.
I'm
And
Ari
that's some
Kaplan.
serious thunder that you do not want to steal, but it's all good.
Well, it is great to be chatting with you today. We've got some cool things that we're going to talk about. As usual, the conversation will no doubt roam in many different directions.
I can't even imagine. I can only hope something flies by the window and it just adds even more flair to this exciting conversation. Yeah, so let's do it. Let's get right down to it. I'm eager to catch up after the last few weeks, and I'm hoping that the people who are listening are having a great summer and that there's enjoying all the interesting things that are happening in our space.
It's crazy. So I went to the Old Bailey the other
Yeah.
night. So there's been one thing. There's been so many events going on. Like so, obviously we've stopped talking, thank goodness, about COVID really. And but people are just going. There's so much going on, so many get-togethers, which is lovely, and
Yeah.
it's. But
You and I are
anyway,
going to see each other at ILTA.
we are going to see each other in Orlando, which is super exciting. So anyone who wants to see us, drop us a line. Um, I went to the Old Bailey, which is the Central Criminal Court in London. It's very famous. People know it internationally. And I was there for an event with Legal UK. They had Professor Richard Susskind there to talk about his. So as you know Richard, and you've interviewed him. He's always been at the forefront of ideas. You can trust when he says something. Quite often, it's very much worth listening up. He's been talking about AI for a really long time and writing books about it since before we all started paying any attention, really. So it was great to hear him speak. He's a really great speaker. To a room. I mean, the Old Bailey is just beautiful. The interior is just incredible. And there was a group of some of the most senior people, barristers. There was Dame Gloucester there who kicked off the proceedings. Anyway, so he was calling, it was interesting because he was calling for this is a UK story, but I think it's got international relevance. So he was calling for a new UK institute to respond to the recent AI development. And one of the tenets was keeping the UK. This is the UK angle because obviously we have globally been respected, in terms of English law. When you've got a jurisdiction clause, often it will be English law applies. So we've kind of dined out on that for years, and there seems to be a real sense of, you know, concern and opportunity. So they're saying, we can't just sit back with the new developments. Richard described it as the most, in terms of the Gen AI announcements and all of the work that's going on now. He described it as the most significant development in his 40 years. And he warned that we can't have a very disjointed approach where everybody's doing a little bit of something and no one really has any authority. He did say that, he referenced blogs when he talked about, he said, I'm trying to think what he said. He said there have been all sorts of events, blogs, lectures, papers, and speculation, but little that is authoritative. Obviously, apart from mine, Ari, and yours.
Of
That's
course. No, no, no. He's absolutely right. Yeah, that's right.
he didn't mean me, or you. But he said, we now need to be coherent. And he called on the leading legal innovators to come together with their ideas as to how we can have a cohesive approach to this sort of not just AI but innovation, and rather than having it being very piecemeal, which I thought was really interesting. He certainly
Yeah,
made
look,
quite a compelling case.
I'm a fan of Richard's. In fact, in 2009, he was the keynote speaker at the ABA Tech Show following the end of Lawyers. Question mark. He's very emphatic about the question mark. And I was the keynote in 2010 and felt super intimidated that I was the keynote speaker after Richard. And then I interviewed him in 2011, and I remember after our interview, I asked him about my own career, like if he had career advice. And he was such a wonderfully generous person has always been to me, and anytime I've ever seen him, and he said, my advice is to be bold. Right? He said, be bold in whatever you're going to do, be bold about it, and make an impact. And I always wonder if I've lived it up enough to that, recommendation. But when I heard that he had given this presentation, and when you and I had spoken about it, it just reminded me that he really has always lived in with that mindset. Like, be bold, propose a national approach, start talking about something generations before it's going to be used in, like, he was so far ahead of these conversations that you can't help but trust that what he's saying is based and founded on, decades of research and practical application. So I think it sounds great, and I hope that it becomes part of a broader approach to harmonizing how this works, how it's applied, what the what the potential guardrails might be, if that makes sense for an industry. So it sounds like it was a super presentation.
Yeah, I love that he gave you careers advice. That is really
Well,
cute.
I'll take it. I'll take it at whatever age, at any stage. I mean, this was in 2011, so it was 12 years ago when we
Yeah,
had that
yeah, yeah.
particular meeting,
He is
and
really.
I'd always admired him. Yeah,
People do really listen. I think you're right. I think he's got to the stage now where, having obviously written a lot, people are now listening. And what's interesting is that I think people are really looking for answers as well, right? But right now, people need guidance, and they're looking for, there's an overwhelm. Like, I'm being approached by law firms more than ever to come and host or speak or talk, and often, the likes of Microsoft would be involved. And I think that there's a real overwhelm of information right now.
yeah.
People are really trying to make sense of it. So I think that it's having someone like Richard and having this sort of centralized thing, rather than just a ton of noise. I don't mean to be disrespectful to other sources of noise, but yeah, I think it's a great shout. So tell me about what's going on in your world. You've been doing more research.
Well, you mentioned this point about trying to understand what the challenges are. Law firms, you mentioned, speaking to a lot of law firms and them being concerned. I actually had the privilege of interviewing, 18 chief operating officers, 10 executive directors, a CEO, and a CAO, a chief administrative officer, for a new report that's really focused on leadership. What are the qualities of leadership? How has that changed? How are leaders navigating change management? That's a topic that I'm participating on a panel on at Ilticon. So it's a concern. The skill set for leaders is changing, the way that they're applying technology and understanding technology, the need to adapt to a multi-generational workplace. Many people have described this period in legal as sort of existential. We have to make a choice now that is going to drive us forward for many years, and it's that's great. I'm doing a webinar on this on August 1st. So I'll be talking about the results, and it's I guess I also have found that there's a real interest in sharing perspectives for this kind of research now.
Yeah, I
And
was
I
trying
don't know
to.
if you're finding that when you have
Yeah,
sources, if they are, you seem.
I think they're. Yeah, I was. Do you know what? As you were talking, I think yes. And I think we always share. I think you and I have talked about that before, and this is a great
Yeah.
time for that. But it was itching my brain as you were talking. Oh, I know. So when you're talking about leadership, one of the things that holds us back, I think, is the personality of the lawyer, and I don't think that we're necessarily that suited to change. And I was trying to remember his name as you were speaking, but it's Dr. Larry Richards.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
Larry Richard.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course, lawyer brain.
and I've interviewed him, you've interviewed, and he, it's fascinating. I don't know how much, if this came through in your conversations at all, or sometimes it's just there in the background, like in terms of leadership. And and how to sort of move to the next level. And the trouble is that lawyers, whether you're in private practice or you've moved in-house, you've got the same thing, which is often it's lawyers who are deeply fearful of change and they are deeply insecure. And I'm, as an ex-lawyer, I can say that without feeling too critical. Yeah, I think that the personality is the interesting thing. That was there an element of people talking about training or overcoming their own personal barriers?
It's so funny that you mentioned that. So the research is supported by 3 organizations: Affinity Consulting, iManage, and SharePoint Technologies. And as a result, I really tried to break it down into profitability and the financial health of the firm, digital transformation, document management, and training and other aspects of deploying technology for leadership purposes and for the kind of the ability for the business to run. And so it's very lucky for me to get to work with these organizations because they aligned perfectly with these themes. And the idea of training and understanding how your systems worked and also deploying, capturing, and just sort of manipulating data in ways that tell stories. All of that has become such a critical set of skills that leaders need, right? They need to be able to answer questions quickly. They need to base those questions on fundamental data that is driving the firm, as opposed to historically, is this group profitable? Everyone's busy. The bills get paid, right? Or is this been a useful tool? Well, people save the document and then they open it, so it must be. You know what I mean? Like I think that people are digging much more deeply into being productive and being efficient. And I would imagine that there is a sensitivity to the fact that machines can do a lot more now. So if we're automating something, that was another data point that came out of this, was sort of how much firms are automating processes, how much are they automating documents. There's a lot of really interesting, rich, granular detail. And I think that, the rise of AI or the practical nature of innovation has made everyone more attuned to it and elevated what firms are doing, which I think is a great thing for clients and it's a great thing for the practice. It removes a lot of the activities that people just didn't like to do or that took a lot of their time in ways that they recognized was less valuable but needed to get done.
It's so interesting. I was speaking to somebody about this. I'm hosting a webinar on the digital law firm, the future firm, and was got people from different perspectives. And I was sort of preparing with somebody earlier who was saying, I'm not interested in automating the entire firm because he said, what I want to do is create a bionic lawyer that's very human facing. He said, and by bionic lawyer, he meant somebody who has all of the tools that they need at their hands to do everything as efficiently as they possibly can, but is very focused because we're a human business, that we deal with relationships, that's never going to, that we couldn't see a day, we were sort of thrashing out ideas, we couldn't see a day when that would change because we deal with people and people want to deal with people. And it's a case of what do you automate, what do you be careful to preserve and protect and enhance, and I think that that's something that people need to be cognizant of and be having lots of conversations about. What's the objective, and are you putting the client need at the very forefront, or are you just getting caught up in this like, oh, I gotta automate everything? Where's the goal?
And my sense is that the pandemic, while it drove a lot of change because it was urgent and necessary, it did give people a more perspective on how much time they're spending on what kinds of activities, like commuting, for example. So once people stopped commuting and they had an extra, whatever that was, 45 minutes each way, an hour and a half, right? I mean, they started thinking, well, what could I do with that time? And if law firms can essentially give equivalent amounts of time back for billing or for training or for mentoring or management or engagement, all of a sudden that's really how you start changing culture. Everybody's talking about, well, we want to preserve our culture. I think culture is something that you want to constantly kind of iterate on, right? Make better and then make improvements, and also listen to where there are gaps in the culture and who's not recognized, and be it as inclusive as possible. And I think you need time for that. You need the ability to focus. And if some piece of technology or a automation protocol can help that, as long as you're using that time more valuably, it just seems like an elevating principle.
I love that. I question whether that would happen. So
Yeah.
I literally, I think if firms listening could think, well, that could be one of our in our manifesto for the future, when we're dealing with, when we're automating more, when we're trying to have, but and that should be something I think everybody should be doing a lot of brainstorming right now about what the future looks like and how to be appealing and attractive both to employees and to clients. And I think that would be a great thing, to be more thoughtful about that. But I do worry, or would imagine, that it would just be more time saved, would be more billable time. You're right. Like, I don't know. Do you think it would change?
The my research is really focused on leadership, and so leaders who have more time to contemplate ways to execute on a vision that was set in a strategic plan years ago tend to be more successful. They have the ability to engage, they can listen without the pressure of something else coming up. And if we were able to somehow adapt that to more of the people in a firm or in a legal department or at a vendor, wherever, my sense is that you would see improvement. You'd certainly see additional work, but really good firms have a sense of their allocation, so they may be able to just fill in where people are less productive and give them the work. You know what I mean? Like I guess in a perfect world, that's kind of what happened. But
Yeah.
you're correct. There's it's questionable like which way that this would go. But I'm an optimist.
You're
Yeah,
Switzerland,
yeah, yeah,
Ari.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
Switzerland. I
I'm
never expected
yeah,
anything
yeah,
other than diplomacy on that answer. But so, well, we'll see. That's a kind of big will see.
yeah.
Um, but I think, have you been talking about funding as well? Like, so I've been doing quite a bit on, it's been I know it's not really a neat segue, but I think if I were to sort of talk about some of the other interesting stuff aside from Gen AI, although there is an element of it to it, it's there seems to be an awful big drop in deals at the moment, like over the last. So I did some research. I thought, perhaps I was imagining, I think you also have been doing something on this, but looking at the, I've followed a lot about private equity investment funding deals over the last year, God no, over years and years, but over the last year, my suspicions that it has fallen off a cliff were confirmed. I was doing some work with Legal Complex, who we've got a kind of informal media partnership with, and Raymond Blidd, and the level of deals has dropped dramatically over the last year. I think 43, so legal and tax deals down by 43% in the first half of 23 compared with 2022. Although the debt financing deals are up dramatically, because I guess when people can't access the equity, then they'll go for the debt, right? So yeah, so I thought that was quite interesting. It sort of confirmed my suspicions, but then to add the Gen AI angle, it'd be interesting to see, because there's obviously a lot of interest and a lot of new companies, and there's this thought that actually that will probably start boosting the number of deals. We've seen quite a lot of activity with startups and investment in that space just recently.
I track less the money that's going in or out and much more the focus on business development, the who's in the space, who's really using what tools. I did a report focused on legal operations leaders, asking them, what tools they use in terms of CRM or other applications. And so I'm less concerned for what I do in terms of the dollars and whether there's an uptick or a drop, and much more in terms of what are the client expectations for different tools, et cetera.
But you know what's really interesting? So perhaps, so because there's less, I was chatting with somebody about CLM, contract
Yeah.
review. They're on the vendor side. They sort of, yeah, they're, so probably should remain nameless, but and they were saying, what impact will this sort of drop in? We've talked a lot about, you know, there was a huge uptick in contract review and, you know, software in the contract space. There's been a massive uptick in I would say usage actually, but there's been a lot of firms that have been buying contract review tools and in the corporate space CLM. What impact does it have if the number of deals falls significantly? Does it mean that more people will start to need software because actually they need to be more efficient because the deals are down? Or does it mean that they start saying, oh, you know, we're going to cut, you know, we don't need these kind of tools in this space? I just thought it was really interesting from that. I suppose that's the segue into the types of research that you do, you know, whether it will have an impact in terms of what they're looking at.
Well, clearly it gives a competitive advantage to the people who've raised their money 2 years ago or what have you, and who are executing very well. But there always seems to be an opportunity. I mean, certainly whether the number has gone down or up, I can think of people who've recently raised money and were very pleased with how that went, both from an investor side and from a company side. So I think that each company just needs to focus on, driving forward in their own, uh, respect. I don't know that what on a day-to-day level, some deals are just unique and interesting, and we've seen that recently. Some just happen to hit at the exact right moment, which is wonderful for, those entrepreneurs. I think that, where money is being raised is less, at least in the immediacy. It's sort of like what less than that is much more, is there product market fit? Is someone going to use your application? I think there are fundamental questions that will come before that. I understand the reality of raising money, not that I have ever done so. So I'm not negating the value of that, but you got to be persuasive in terms of getting that money. You have to have some sort of fit. You have to have some strong value proposition. You need to have like a willing community of folks who want to try new applications. And I think you're there. So it's a wonderful time, regardless of what that looks like from a funding standpoint, because there's an appetite for trying new tools and deploying them, and kind of participating in a proof of concept. And when you and I are at Ilticon, I'm sure that we will have conversations and see and hear stories about people trying that, doing that, what their experience has been. And also the users are much more sophisticated. The
Yeah.
people who are going to be participating are just much more adept at trying new tools and applying them to their systems and making decisions about whether or not they're truly useful. So I think that that's the one thing that entrepreneurs need to bear in mind, is that you're selling to a more sophisticated universe of people, and they're going to make decisions quickly. They're going to know or not know fairly soon. And if they're participating in that cohort that's trying your tool, make sure they have the greatest experience ever.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key piece.
So I guess to wrap up, so ILTA, so are you speaking or not this year?
I'm
Oh,
speaking, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to being back. The last time it was in this, I'm pretty sure the last time it was in Orlando was in 2019, which was a
yeah,
great ILTA con,
it was
and
great.
I'm excited to be back. So I
What
look forward to
session are
it.
you doing? I know we'll speak before then, but what session? Just because I guess people start planning. I'm not a really good planner. I always feel like I start to panic, and then I think I'm going to plan like a month out and arrange lots of meetings, and then I forget about it. And
Well, mine's at 2 p.m. on the Wednesday, which I
right,
went to the 23rd of August, and
okay,
it's about change fatigue, and I'm
oh, brilliant.
participating with several other just remarkable panelists, all of whom are from law firms, incredible experience. So I'm honored, and of course on that Wednesday morning, I'm hosting a run We're trying to figure out the time. They've proposed
Oh
6,
my
and I thought
God.
6 seemed kind of early, even I'll be up, but it just seemed early. And I think last year we did it at 6:30, but it depends on when the opening sessions are. So we'll see. But definitely bring your running shoes. I know you're coming. I know you're.
For anyone who's listening in, who's listened to previous ones, we talk a lot about Ari's runs at conferences. In fact, I think statistically, if we got GPT to analyze how much we spent talking about your runs as opposed to anything else, I
Uh,
think
the machine would be like, is Ari like a running teacher? Does
maybe
he
I'll
ever?
bring
I
my
bet you would like
shoes.
describe it. What does Ari do? Ari owns a running store. I think that's that's the impression. Like, do you do anything? Yes, I sell Brooks sneakers and I love them. Anything else? Anyway, wonderful as
On that
always to
note,
connect with you. I'm excited to follow up and I appreciate the time.
thanks,
All
Ari.
right.
It's really
See
lovely
ya.
chatting with you.